everyone, it's Allie, and today we'll be discussing what in my opinion is going to be the single most fun build you'll ever play in any RPG, period. Today we'll be discussing a build I've long maintained and long had a build guide for, Void Knight Autobomber, which in Season 2, EHG have only made a lot better by massively increasing its movement speed, massively increasing its tankiness through a Sentinel rework, and completely reworking Time Rot into an amazing way of scaling our damage, giving us an avenue to potentially do even more damage than we did before. Void Knight Autobomber is basically going to take all of the different metrics that you might want to weigh a build upon and combine all of them together into what is, in my opinion, the single best starter build and by far the comfiest build in the game for you to play. Our build is basically going to do exactly what it says on the tin. With the new Abyssal Rush node, every time you take a step forward, if your Devouring Orb is off a cooldown, it's just going to immediately get cast for you. Because of this build is a literal one-button build where all you do is spam Volatile Reversal, which has been completely reworked this season to be an absurd movement skill, which with our 130% cooldown recovery rate, we're going to be able to spam very, very quickly. All you're going to be doing this build is just teleporting around, blowing up packs, teleporting around, blowing up packs, teleporting around, blowing up packs, and having an absolutely wonderful time. I am excited for it. It's very fun, and the cool thing about this is one of the simplest builds in the game to put together, given that we don't need any specific uniques, we don't need any specific gear, and we're literally just scaling off of generic stats. With Time Rot, we are now going to swap over from a hit build to a damage over time build, so you're going to be able to watch every boss melt. I am extremely excited about this, and if you know anything about me, I have a policy to not play a build more than once, and I am now breaking my policy because this build has gotten me that excited about it, and I cannot wait to share with all of you guys. As always, with every single Allie build guide, there will be a whole written guide that's going to be attached to it that's going to go over your passive points and how exactly put the build together, your stat priorities, and where your gear is going to look like, idols, blessings, and a full leveling guide that's going to hold your hand through every single aspect of this build. Now, I would highly recommend that you go and look through it, which will be linked in the description below, as I put a lot of time and effort into every single aspect of this to make this build guide be the best possible thing I could possibly offer to you. If there's anything that you might be confused about or might want a little bit more information on, it'll all be in the written guide, so please do take a look through it. At the same time, I will also be linking a build planner in the description below, which will also be linked in the written guide, which is going to also have all the gear with all the stats and what the passive tree is going to look like. There'll also be sliders that you can move around to show you exactly when to pick up what passive point when. So with this, your hand should basically be held through every single aspect of playing this build. So the first thing we discuss about this build is, well, exactly how to level. Now, we're not going to be able to start playing our build until we get renouncement at about level 35 to 40 or so. Until then, we're going to be playing what is literally the single comfiest setup for leveling basically any build, Hammer Throw, and Holy Javelin. First off, in the first few zones, just simply level as you will with both Vengeance and Warpath, and then once you unlock Hammer Throw, start using Hammer Throw for everything. The thing that we need to discuss about Hammer Throw is that it's a throwing skill, meaning that whatever stats you have on your melee weapon are not going to apply to the damage of your Hammer Throw. What is going to apply is any sort of throwing damage on your gloves, your belts, your amulets, and most importantly, the hybrid throwing and reduced mana cost roll on rings. Something you really need to be on the lookout for, as if you can get yourself even just one of these rolls, your leveling experience is going to be made a lot easier. Try to be on the lookout for any sort of hybrid throwing shards that you might come across, as they will rarely drop. If you do get one, immediately go and put the hybrid throwing roll on your ring as soon as you can. This reduced mana cost, like I said, is very important. Please do not skip out on it. In the description below, there will be a second build plan linked along with the main build plan that is specifically going to be for leveling. In this build planner, there'll be a shorter version of the passive tree progression all the way up until renouncement, while at the same time having passive tree progressions for each of the skills that we're going to use while leveling. To quickly go over exactly what we're going to do, for your Hammer Throw, your goal is to immediately rush the Iron Spiral, which will then make it so your projectiles will spin, which will make them multi-hit bosses and giving you quite a lot of extra damage. You're going to then unlock Lunge, and you're going to basically make Lunge your best friend, at least for the majority of leveling, as it's going to be your main mobility skill until we get further into the build. Simply just spam Lunge as much as you can, as it has infinite range. As long as you can hover over an enemy, you will immediately lunge to it. For your second specialization skill, you're then going to want to unlock Rive. Here, you're simply just pick up a point in Sever, and then a few points in Bound Weapon, and you're going to use Rive as a combo skill with Hammer Throw on specifically bosses. You're going to Hammer Throw until you completely run out of mana, and then you're followed up with a few Rives, which will then very quickly replenish your mana, and then afterwards you can go back to spamming Hammer Throw. Once you unlock Javelin a few levels later, you specialize out of Rive completely and specialize into Javelin, and then you're going to look to pick up 1 point and go for the legs, 2 points of Burning Strength, and you're going to get yourself Holy Trail. Holy Trail is an amazing leveling tool, and you're basically just going to use this for the majority of clearing, as Holy Trail should basically instantaneously kill everything, followed by a few Hammer Throws on any sort of rare enemies they need. From here, just simply keep following the passive tree progressions for both Javelin and Hammer Throw, and you should have a pretty easy time following that in the passive tree all the way up until renouncement. In terms of the kind of gear that you're going to want to look for while leveling, as I mentioned, look for all the throwing throwing rolls everywhere, along with you trying to get vitality on your helmet, chestplate, and boots, movement speed, and any sort of other resistances you can get your hands on. Try to heavily focus on void resistance for the first few zones of the story, as it's extremely painful, and you should always do everything you can to always be physical resistance cap, as that's going to go a very long way. Outside of that, just hold W and you should have a really fun time with hammer throw all the way through. Now, while leveling might be fun and really simple, we do need to discuss when exactly you're going to be swapping over to Devouring Orb. Devouring Orb is going to be a skill that you unlock as soon as you put 20 passive points into the Void Knight tree. With this, we're not going to be able to immediately swap over to it, but you are going to want to immediately specialize your third slot into Devouring Orb so you can start gaining experience and be ready for the full swap. The full swap is going to happen once you do manage to get yourself 5 points into Renouncement, which is then going to convert your Smite from scaling off of Attunement into scaling off of Vitality. At this point, you're going to be converting yourself over to a spellcasting build where all you're going to really look for on your gear is going to be as much vitality as possible, as Devouring Orb and Smite are going to scale off of vitality, and you're going to try to get yourself either a staff or a wand that's going to have some added generic spell damage on it, and any sort of percent void damage, percent spell damage, or damage over time roll they can possibly find. At this point, you can de-specialize out of everything else, specialize into Smite and Volatile Reversal, and you're going to be off to races and have a really good time. The main playstyle here is going to be fairly simple, as all we're going to be doing is simply using Abyssal Rush to automatically cast all of our Devouring Orbs around us. This is going to be paired up with Volatile Reversal, which is going to be your main mobility skill, and it's going to be a large portion of your DPS due to all the utility that it has to offer. With the large amount of cooldown recovery that we're going to have in our build through things such as Temporal Velocity, Swift Rest on Anomaly, and a lot of cooldown on our gear, the cooldown of Volatile Reversal should be really low, meaning we can go and pick up ourselves Future Focus, giving us 2 dashes of it, which is going to feel very, very comfortable. Every time you do a dash with Volatile Reversal, you're going to do a little AoE around where you land, and this AoE is going to apply an Abyssal Echo onto everything, and it's going to put a Time Rift debuff on enemies, which is going to make them take more damage. While clearing, don't really have to worry about this, but on bosses, you're going to really want to make sure you press a Volatile Reversal every few seconds to keep up your Void Essence and your Time Rift debuffs. On top of this, we're going to have Anomaly. Anomaly is going to be a skill they're going to want to numlock, which there'll be a video in the description below going over how exactly numlock, and this is going to be just a massive utility that is going to give us quite a lot, while at the same time giving you all of your sustain through Time Eater and Void Maw, giving you quite a lot of generic leech. Later on, you're going to eventually unlock Symbols of Hope, which is going to be a passive skill that's going to give you a lot of added spell damage, a lot of percent damage, and a lot of endurance special. This is going to be something that you do not want to actively press a button on, and you're simply going to put it on your skill bar and just leave it there and never touch it ever again. The final skill to mention here is going to be Smite. Smite's going to be really simple, as we're only going to be using it on bosses and nothing else, which through Fissure is going to generate fissures on the ground, which are little damage over time pools that stack together up to 9 in total. They're going to give us quite a lot of damage through both Sacrifice and Heavy Impact, massively scaling them. Now, this is going to be something that we need to go test when Season 2 launches, and this will be something that we're going to make an update video on, as I don't actually know how much damage our build's going to do, and it kind of looks like our DPS might be really, really solid with just Devouring Orb on its own, meaning we could potentially in the future completely drop Smite from the build and just pick up something like Abyssal Echoes. At this point, we're still going to be a hit-based build where Cosmic Impact is going to do a pretty large chunk of our damage, but as soon as we go and get ourselves Rock Rip, we are going to be able to start scaling our Time Rot fairly quickly, along with us getting World Rot on Devouring Orb around the same time. At this point, we are going to be converting over to dot builds where the damage over time areas around each orb and the Time Rots should be the majority of your DPS. Later on, we're going to also fit in a Forgotten Knight set, which is going to even further increase your Time Rot damage, while at the same time increasing the damage of the areas around your orbs and increasing the fissures from our Smite. Next, let's discuss how exactly your build's going to scale. In terms of offensive scaling, it's pretty simple, as the majority of our scaling is going to simply come from Rock Rip. This is going to make us want to scale as much Time Rot and as much slow chance as we can, with the majority of our slow chance coming from a roll on our weapon and will, and then for our Time Rot chance, we are going to basically try to get it in every single place that we can. Something like Rot Ripples, for example, not only is it going to make your Time Rot spread around, but it's also going to give you 50% Time Rot chance, which effectively doubles the damage of it. And we also have quite a lot of other passives, such as Singular Purpose and Void Adept on Devouring Orb, further scaling our generic void damage, meaning that all of our different damage instances are all going to be scaled up together. While the majority of your damage is going to specifically come from those Time Rots that you're going to apply, the Devouring Orbs that are going to orbit around you are going to do a pretty decent amount of damage, given we have damage over time on quite a lot of gear. When then paired up with the fissures from Smite, you should have a pretty nice package of 3 separate damage over times that all are scaling together really nicely, with the Time Rot being where the majority of the damage is going to come from. In terms of defensive layers, oh boy, do we have a lot to work with. We have Abyssal Endurance, Patient Doom, Abyss Fluctuations, Woe, Singular Purpose, Eternal Form, and Dark Maul all stacking together to give you a lot of health and a lot of damage reduction. The main thing here is going to be Abyssal Fluctuations, converting 50% of your elemental damage taken to Void, along with Abyssal Endurance and Fluctuations, reducing that Void damage that you take take, meaning you're going to feel pretty comfy against most things that you fight. At the same time, Woe is going to give you frailty, which makes you take less damage taken from whatever has frailty on it, and it's going to slow enemies, which through singular purpose is going to double dip and give you 10% less damage taken from both slowed and time rotting enemies. On top of this, we're also looking to grab ourselves endurance, as we can get ourselves quite a lot of free endurance threshold through both Symbols of Hope and through Paladin passive points that we are picking up to unlock Symbols of Hope, and this should give you a really nice defensive layer when combined with all the leech that we're going to get from Anomaly. Next, let's discuss the kind of gear that you're going to want for the build. So we have the nice benefit of not really needing any unique items to begin, and we're just going to be using nothing but exalted items. There's one unique that is extremely powerful and very common that you really would want to look for, which is going to be a Code of an Erased Sentinel. Now, you don't need this, and you just run a normal relic, but Code gives us +1 to all Sentinel skills, which is something we really like in the build, as extra skill levels is very, very impactful, and it's a Weaver item, meaning you could roll random stats on it as you play with it, and ideally try to find yourself a damage over time version of it, and if possible, as a mid/endgame optimization, one that also has Symbols of Hope, but you don't really need that. Realistically, for a Code, you can kind of do whatever you need to fit into your build, so if you end up getting one with life or resistances, and that ends up solving some issue in your build, that's completely fine. On the rest of your gear, realistically, try to fit in health and resistances on any suffixes wherever you can as needed. It shouldn't be too difficult to cap the resistances in this build, given we get a lot of fire and void res for free from Juggernaut, and we get even more void and some added physical from Abyssal Endurance. With this, and the fact that Vitality gives you 1% necrotic and 1% poison resistance per point, basically over half of your resistances are taken care of for you in the first place. This then is going to allow us to fit in a lot more useful stats on our gear. Some of the things they're going to really want to make sure that you fit into the build as breakpoints for you to reach is going to be to try and find yourself a mountain shield base, which has endurance as implicit. Try to roll an endurance suffix on it, and then get yourself an extra endurance roll on one of your rings, as this should put you at about 60% endurance, which is a pretty important defensive breakpoint for the build. On your helmet, you're going to really want to make sure you're looking for levels to Devouring Orb. This is going to be the bread and butter of our builds, and this is where you're going to get quite a lot of extra power. Do everything you can for this. If you have to put on a bad helmet with really bad stats that has Exalted Devouring Orb, that's completely fine. Just make sure you get this as soon as you can. For our helmet, our chest plate, and our boots, you're going to really want to make sure you're looking for Vitality, as Vitality scales all of our damage, gives us more health, and it gives us resistances. It is by far our best stat. On your rings, your belts, your gloves, and basically in almost every single slot, you're going to be able to either get yourself damage over time or void damage and prefixes, and there's basically nothing else that really can compete with these. Finally, on your belt and your boots, try to do everything you can to also fit in a cooldown recovery rate suffix, as this build is a build that loves CDR, and CDR effectively is turned into just a DPS increase for everything we do. The more CDR you have, the comfier everything feels, the faster you play, the more Devouring Orbs you have, the better the build is overall. The only other thing to mention is to try and get yourself high-end armor bases. Try to get yourself a pair of Vanguard boots if possible, as you're optimizing the build. For your necklace, you can realistically look for any base, but ideally a bow and amulet base would be great because it fixes the rest of your resistance a little bit easier. But if you feel like you don't need that, so you can go for something like an Oracle base. And then finally, for your weapon, you're going to really want to make sure you go and grab yourself a Nagasa Scimitar, as this base is really the only sword base that is good for us. We have to specifically put the Forgotten Knight weapon on here, so please try to find one of these before going and crafting that item. The only other thing to mention about the weapon is try to get yourself Armor Shred on hit as a suffix on it, because it's the only place where you can get Armor Shred in the build, and that is a pretty large DPS increase if you can fit it on there. The final thing to mention here, in terms of gear, is going to be the sets that we're going to want to use. In Season 2, they're reworking how sets work, and what we're going to be able to do is we're going to be able to shatter pieces of the Forgotten Knight set, so pick up every single one that you see off the ground, and then we could use those to craft set items with our own stats on them. But the point is that this allows us to get the Forgotten Knight sets, which is going to give us a lot of extra damage with our Time Rots, and just give us more global damage per Time Rot an enemy has. This is a massive deal for the build, and we're going to want to try and fit this in as soon as we can, but you do not need to go and rush this, and you should just focus on the rest of your gear first. As for your blessings, these are going to be the ones you typically want to go for. Try to focus more on the armor blessings and get a good roll on those, as well as getting a good roll on Resolve of Humanity from Reign of Dragons. That's pretty much all you need to know about the gear. Again, if there is anything here they didn't cover in high detail, I highly recommend to go look at the written guide, as every single gear slot is going to be gone over in more detail if you need it, as well as talking about exactly what kind of exalted mods and whatnot you can look for as alternatives. So please do check that out, as a lot of effort has been put into it. That's everything you need to know about the build, and honestly, I am so beyond ecstatic and ready to play it on launch, because this build is honestly my baby. This is the build that originally got me into Last Epoch to begin with. It's the build I've been hooked on. It's a build I played 5 times in a row now. And while I never expected to play it again, I would be doing this build a disservice by not playing it, given how much is changing about it and just how much better it's going to be now. If you're also going to play yourself on launch, I really hope you have fun with it. And I will be streaming this day one, and I will be racing to level 100 with this build. So if you want to come along and level with me and see all the theory crafting that we're all going to inevitably do as a community on this build and get excited with all of us whenever we make any big changes, I honestly really recommend for you to come by my Twitch stream and come have fun with us on the 17th. With that said, I hope you enjoyed the build guide, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll see you cuties in the next video.